me! Hey there, strangers, my name's NeonNeos, and this is a review. Let me ask you a question. Do you like indie games? Do you like wacky gameplay? Do you like crazy franchise crossovers? Do you like unnecessary explosions? Then maybe I could interest you in one of my wares. Oop. Not that side. Forgot it's not Tuesday. Here. Ah yes, here we go. This, my dear viewer, is the holy grail of untapped potential. A tale of passion, war, loss, chaos, and maybe an explosion or two. So, interested? Why don't we take an in-depth look and experience the wonderful chaos that is Cortex Command. Cortex Command, Cortex Command. How do I even begin to explain what this game is? Both at its core and its significance to me personally. I think I may have the most unique relationship with this game in the world. It's because of this game's existence and my coverage of it that I have any presence at all on YouTube, and probably the only reason you're even seeing this video right now. Because after 5 years on YouTube and over 1,000 videos posted across multiple channels, my videos on Cortex Command have always stood head and shoulders above everything else I've ever done. No matter what direction I attempt to branch out into, mainstream, indie, multiplayer, single player, new games, old games, no matter what, by far the most common feedback I receive is requests for more Cortex Command videos. For whatever reason, as far as YouTube is concerned, I am the Cortex Command guy. A title I wear proudly, I might add. But because of this, when I decided to start trying to properly start doing reviews, there was no question what my first review had to be. It would be almost criminal not to start this journey off by covering a game that, without exaggeration, has had a significant and lasting impact on my life. Now, while it may be true that I seem to be known as the Cortex Command guy, and most of you who know me probably know just about everything there is to know about this weird little indie game, I think it's only fair that we start with the basics, so that anybody who's watching this not as familiar with the game's in and outs as we are, understands what it is we're talking about. Besides, this is a review after all. There wouldn't be much of a point to the video if we didn't cover the game now, would there? At its core, Cortex Command is a 2D sprite-based action platformer with a heavy emphasis on combat. This is coupled with a resource gathering mechanic allowing you to harvest gold mid-match and buy new units on the fly, and depending on the game mode you're playing, transcends into a larger metagame, where your resources are carried over between matches and used to build custom bases and deploy units across every battle your army takes place in. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's take a step back. Any individual round of Cortex Command usually consists of you controlling a brain in a jar, either attached to the ceiling of your compound or a robot body. I'm sorry, did I lose you there? No, you heard that right. You play as a brain in a jar who uses some sort of unexplained telepathic or electronic ability to control any number of mindless robot or clone bodies. Your objective, 90% of the time, is to use these units against the forces of an enemy brain in a jar. Whoever destroys the enemy brain first wins. Yeah, this is a pretty unique game, both mechanically and story-wise. There's not really anything out there quite like it. And speaking of story, why don't we talk about it? When you first start up the game after the substantial load time that, depending on the number of mods you have installed, can take upward of 10 or 15 minutes on your first boot, but we'll get back to that. Upon starting up the game, you're greeted with a series of still panels giving you the basic plot of your adventure. Aw, no animated intro? That's so lame! Hey, shut your face! It's an indie game. What do you want? But the story revealed to us here is that in the not-too-distant future, humanity is taken to the stars in search of adventure and riches. However, their journey takes them beyond the limits of the human body, either due to the inhospitable factors of space travel, or just the sheer time it takes to travel the absurd distances they're required to go, and they're forced to shed their mortal coils, storing their brains in jars to survive the trip. And then they somehow learn how to psychically control robots and clone bodies, which you would think they would just put the brains in instead of having to live on what amounts to a fishbowl containing their brain. But hey, what do I know? I'm not a crazy spaceman! Yet. Anyways, upon finishing this nice little intro sequence, we're treated to a theme that I have to admit is pretty freaking awesome, as we're brought to the main menu. It's a great way to start up your game and get people pumped to play this weird little indie game about psychic robot controlling brains in jars. Man, that's a weird summary. But now that you've finally made your way to the title screen here, you're presented with several options, as video game menus are often known to do. And there's a few pretty notable things here, some of which are incredibly misleading and confusing on your first viewing, but I'll come back to some of the more interesting ones later. The two most important things on the screen from the start are the options of campaign and scenario battle. Now, logically, you're going to go straight to campaign mode. That's where the main part of the game is, right? It is in most games, and it kind of is, I guess? Let me tell you this right now. I love Cortex Command. It is a ton of fun, but man, is it not finished. Despite the fact that this game has been in development for nearly 18 years. Yes, you heard that right. This game is nearly 2 decades old and is still being worked on. It is still not finished. So when you start up the campaign, the game will prompt you to play the tutorial first if you've never played it before. And while this tutorial is useful for the most basic of basic information, like how to control multiple units at once, gathering resources, buying new units, and combat with enemy opponents, it does not prepare you for the pure, unadulterated insanity that you're about to experience. But hey, let's just go ahead and assume you've completed the tutorial. You know how to move units around, you know how to buy dudes, you can shoot bang, you're ready for this. Let's click that button and... Blah? 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 What is this? What is any of this? The game didn't mention any of this in the tutorial. This, my friends, is the pinnacle example of an unfinished game with incredibly promising and unexplained depth. Let me break it down for you. Upon starting up your campaign, you can designate up to 4 players, the number of brains each player has, how many gold sites there are, how much money you start with, the difficulty of the AI, and even the overall intelligence of the AI units for each individual player. And most importantly, the faction that each player is designated with. Each of these factions has various strengths and weaknesses, such as the dummy faction, a faction of basically crash test dummies, being cheap to buy but being very, very flimsy, so they're good for zerg rushing with a squad of units, though despite their fragile nature, they still have one of the most powerful weapons of any of the vanilla factions of the game. Whereas a faction like the Browncoats, my preferred faction, are much more expensive, but much harder units, allowing them to take much more damage before going down. So you can just load up 1 or 2 troops with an arsenal of weaponry and send them against an entire squad of your enemies. Not to mention their flaming shotgun is a thing of beauty. There are also several other vanilla factions, but they all follow the same basic format of having various units and weapons with different strengths and weaknesses. But just because you have to select your faction doesn't mean you don't have access to every other faction's units or weapons. All of these are just clone bodies and robots after all. It'll just cost you a little bit more money to buy items from outside of your selected faction. You can turn this off in the options to force everyone to pick from their own faction's items though, if you'd prefer for everyone to just use their own pre-balanced technology. Or keep anyone from going crazy and selecting a cluster nuke or a black hole bomb from one of the hundreds of modded factions that you can add in. But we'll come back to that. Alright, so you've done it. You've weighed your options, filled out your spreadsheets, searched the forums, polled the community, and learned the rules of war. And finally, picked your faction, selected the number of players, gold size funds, and all that jazz. Now, it's finally time to get started. Now the true confusion begins. This is your world map. This is where you'll be planning all of your skirmishes and preparing your defenses. Let me just break it down for you. This is going to be a lot to take in, so just stick with me here. From this screen, you can see the stats of all the various players in the various corners of the screen. Their gold reserves, the number of spare brains they have, any and all gold sites or bases are all displayed on this screen. Every turn is the start of a new day. Each player will be rewarded 1,000 gold, the resources used for purchasing everything in this game, for every gold site that they control. And then they are charged a flat $300 for upkeep of their forces and bases and all that sort of fun stuff. So the more gold sites you have, the better off you are. After the money calculation phase begins the planning phase. From here, each player selects the gold site that they want to attack that turn. Or you can just sit out and stock up on resources if you have bases. It's entirely up to you. At this point, you'll decide how much of your money you want to spend on this potential battle. Yes, that's right. You can only use the money in that battle that you set along with the brain for that specific fight. But make sure you set aside enough resources to scan the terrain if it's a new map, or you'll be running around blind in a fog of war. And here's a hint. It's a bad idea. It's a bad thing. You don't want that. Upon finalizing your orders, the combat phase begins, and every player's orders are carried out simultaneously. Lucked out and landed on a gold site that nobody else picked? Congratulations! You now own your very own gold site and will be raking in 1,000 gold a turn for as long as you can hold on to it. But what happens if 1, 2, or even 3 of your opponents pick the same landing site as you? Well, slap on your commander helmet because it's time for your first battle. Commander's for a hummus, right? Is that a thing? No, not. When the battle starts, your BrainBot, 1 anti-air drone, and potentially more units depending on how much money you've allotted for this particular battle, will all fly down in one of your faction's dropships. Welcome to Cortex Command! It only took 20 minutes and a degree in astrophysics, but you've made it! This is where the real meat of the game begins. Your objective is to destroy any and all enemy brains on the field while trying to keep yours alive. And you've got a ton of options. From here, you can open the buy menu and actually buy yourself an army. Either select from the pre-built troop options or build your very own from troops to guns, melee weapons, bombs, grenades, or some sort of modded BS. But we'll get back to that. Then just select the dropship you want to use and your troop will be flown in expertly by the AI in the spacefaring vehicle of your choice. Or more likely, flown off course crashing into a wall or shot down and wasting all of your hard-earned funds. Or you can just drop in your new soldier from space in a box. It's entirely up to you. How does that even work? From here, you can manually control your troops using your unexplained psychic powers, or give them orders to guard their position, hunt for the enemy brain, or even for gold. Or, if you don't trust the AI to find a way around on its own, and you shouldn't, you can designate a specific path for it to travel. You can even create a squad so they can travel together as an unstoppable force of... Oh, come on! You can also just load up ships with bombs for proper bombing runs, or, if you're feeling cheeky, you can call it an empty ship to steal the enemy brain and send them back to space! Yes, that totally works. Make sure to manage your resources carefully though, or you won't be able to buy any more troops and you'll be at the mercy of your foes, and then it's game over. For this one battle anyways. Just remember, if your situation is looking too dire, you can always retreat by calling in a ship and taking your own brain back to space to keep from losing your commander. You can also do this at any time throughout the battle with any of your troops. Sending anything other than your brain back to space will actually give you back resources. Just make sure you do it in a dropship or they'll kind of die. Either by ending up in space outside of your control or falling back to the ground at terminal velocity and splattering everywhere. At this point, you'll probably have noticed that this game is rather unique with how it handles physics, both with units and with terrain. Everything you see is completely and utterly destructible. This can lead to some interesting strategies or hilariously brutal defeats. But we'll get more into that later. For now, just note that units are able to dig right down into the terrain. And if they happen to be equipped with a digger, they can actually collect gold to buy more troops or weapons. Any funds you have at the end of the battle will be added to your overall funds back at the world map screen. So it's always beneficial to set one or more of your troops to dig for gold as soon as possible upon starting a battle. Now, just sit back and enjoy the jankiest of physics-based movement as you vainly attempt to move around only to inevitably fall in a hole or slam into the ground at 1 billion miles an hour as you lose control of your jetpack or find yourself suddenly and far beyond your control, crushed by the engine of a dropship that's blasted off the enemy ship, circled around the planet twice, and against all odds, homed in directly on your brain, crushing it and ruining your expertly executed plans. Like, constantly. Whether you win or lose, you'll end up back at the map screen where the gold site will be awarded to whichever player had the last brain standing. Any lost or retreating brains will be calculated and the next day/turn will begin. Occasionally, new gold sites will be uncovered to keep things fresh and add more places for combat and chances for resources. This continues until all but one player has used up all of their brains and can no longer control any units. So, let's say you won a gold site. You want to protect it, right? I mean, what are you gonna do? Just drop in troops every single time an enemy player wants to attack it? I mean, you can do that if you want, or you can allocate a set amount of funds to build your own base! Yes, this is another mind-bogglingly detailed and complex portion of the game. Select from hundreds of bunker bits, tiny pieces of fortification, place doors, add turrets, place troops, outfit those troops with whatever guns you want. It's pretty freaking great. The only downside is that it's pretty easy to outwit the AI if you really want to be cheap, but I still really love this option. Just make sure that you don't try to build more than you actually have the funds for, or you'll end up with half a completed base with nobody in it to defend your brain and no money to buy any troops until enough turns have passed to actually be able to pay to build it all. Alternatively, if you don't want to spend hours customizing every single one of your bases, you can just set the amount of funds you're wanting to spend and hit the auto build option and let the computer make a base for you. Just be warned, it's not always the best base. But sometimes you will get really impressive and intricate works of art. It's just kind of a toss-up on which one you'll get. That, and it really just kind of depends on how much money you're willing to spend on it. And that's it. Each day, the cycle of phases continues, allowing you to manage your resources, attack, defend, and build until all but one player's brains have been expended and nobody can fight anymore. Be the one with the most brains, or in the case of everyone having all their brains down the planet defending bases, be the one with the most money, and you win! So, is that it? Was that the entire game? Well, yes and no. This is the entirety of what could be considered the meat of the game. It's still a ton of fun and has a lot of variants to play with, but there's not much more. But what was that you said about the skirmish mode earlier, Neos? Oh, that's... Well, here's where things get a little more interesting. Skirmish mode allows you to play one of these single battle scenarios. They're often much like the combat phase of the campaign mode, but with some more unique variations. In the base vanilla game, you have missions such as Brain vs. Brain, almost the exact same mode you played in the campaign with two player brains trying to destroy each other. Bunker Breach, where you attempt to attack a fortified pre-made base filled with enemies, or play as the base trying to survive incoming waves of enemy troops. Droid Assault, a mode where you infiltrate a much more intricately designed and fortified base. This is one of my favorites. Or this weird scenario where you battle a giant enemy crab. And then you dig a hole and grab an item and you win. Yay? There's also one where you fight your way into a cave where clone machines are constantly spitting out zombies who mindlessly lob grenades at you. Yes, this is a real thing, and it's also one of the most fun of the bunch. And, unfortunately, that's about it. You do have some really cool mutators in the menu that allow you to set the games to do things like super jetpacks, or headshots only, or infinite ammo, or give death only, where units can only die when they are completely and utterly obliterated and blown up to the point where they can't actually move. It's a really cool idea. But that's it for the game modes. One pretty decent campaign option, 5 factions, and a handful of scenarios. However, there is one other thing that I haven't had a chance to talk about just yet that might help. A little something known as mods! Now, I know what you're thinking, those things that people download to tweak or break games by adding better textures or turning everyone to hot sunbathing supermodels with lightsabers and jetpacks. Yes, those. Mods are almost essential to the Cortex Command experience. Apparently it's due to the incredibly easy to mod nature of the game, but you can and will find just about any nerd culture franchise represented here, not to mention some of the most ludicrous mods imaginable alongside them. But let me be perfectly clear here. I have never seen a community so dedicated to a game in such a way that they're almost exclusively what keeps the community alive and the game still relevant. We're talking Skyrim or Fallout levels of dedication to mods to a game practically no one has ever heard of and is clearly unfinished. And when I say there's a lot of mods, I mean there is a lot of mods. We're talking thousands of mods over the course of the past 2 decades on the game's own community forums and the Steam Workshop. If you take the community mods into account, Cortex Command may possibly have the most diverse roster of any game of all time. On a side note, one of my favorite game series of all time is Command & Conquer, one of the granddaddies of the RTS. Sadly, it never really branched outside of its real-time stretch. Oh wait! There's mods for that! Complete with both GDI and NOD factions in intricate detail, and even the infamous radioactive rock known as Tiberium, that will dynamically grow and infect the terrain of your map over the course of your game. I freaking love this game! Ever wonder who would win in a battle between the Galactic Empire from Star Wars and the Space Marines from Warhammer 40k? Bam! Done! Maybe you're more of a console shooter fan. How about Halo versus Gears of War? Got it. How about something a little more weird, like, say, Doom versus Gundam? Boom! How about one of those flying saucer thingies from the Metal Slug series battling, let's say, Agent Smith from the Matrix movies? Oh, and also, they're hanging out in Super Mario World. Well, you may have me on that. Nope! Bam! We've got that too. But the mods aren't just restricted to weird schoolyard fanboy who would win arguments. There's tons of unique custom factions and weapon packs. Dudes who shoot acid, mods who specialize in air vehicles, giant robots, mods that add crazy weapons like a black hole bomb, nuclear fridge, tank, guns that can fire through the entire map in one shot. You want it, there's a good chance it's here. Heck, there's a good chance there's mods of something you didn't even know you wanted until you found it. Take, for instance, one of my favorite weapons of all time, the Angry Rainbow Cannon. It's a cannon that fires spiraling rainbows. Oh, it's so pretty. You know, up until the point where it starts firing bullets and grenades in all directions, destroying everything in its wake. Oh, and then it bursts and shoots exploding shark tuna things that explode on impact, and then it starts raining flaming guitars. Yeah, this is a neat game. But mods aren't just units and weapons. There's tons of custom maps or even mods that add new parts for you to build custom bunkers with. And possibly the most impressive set of mods and the best way to extend your gameplay are the custom scenarios and full conversion mods. Yes, there are mods that add completely new gameplay scenarios, ones with custom characters, storylines, cutscenes. How the crap did they do that? Or even mods that change your game into a completely different one. Want to play your game like some sort of weird tactical strategy game where you build facilities, upgrade units, and invade enemy nations? Unmapped Lands 2 has you covered. Feel like taking to the stars and having your very own 2D space adventure, complete with factions, orbital bombardments, and space pirate invasions? Void Wanderers, man. Void freaking Wanderers. What I'm saying is, this game's got mods for days, dude! It's impressive, to say the least. So, is this game worth your time? In my years of being a gamer, I have seen many a game just not live up to its potential. Whether it's due to lack of time, resources, meddling from the higher-ups, whatever. But never in my life have I seen a game who's not only had its potential unlocked by its community, but the community is almost exclusively what has kept the game alive and worthy of your attention. I've always loved Cortex Command for its goofy physics, interesting 2D presentation with destructible terrain, and unintentionally ludicrous levels of potential mayhem and gore, even before I discovered the modding scene for the game. But even I would admit that unless you find the quirky gameplay charming enough to keep you entertained, there's not really much to it. It's an unfinished game with massive amounts of potential, but that's just the base, vanilla, out-of-the-box experience. With the absolutely insanely dedicated modders for the game, it becomes a completely different experience with seemingly limitless amounts of entertainment potential. But hey, maybe that's just me enjoying the idea of shooting rainbows filled with flaming electric guitars at Master Chief while a mammoth tank runs over a Terminator in the background. Video games. You know, Data, the head developer over DataRealm Studios, the creators of Cortex Command, has gone on record saying that apparently Nox of Minecraft fame says that he got the idea for selling the game while the game was still in development to fund the game's development. Apparently, he got the idea from Cortex Command. So if that's true, whether this game right here was a financial success or not, it has had a massive impact on the gaming medium and gaming culture, just pop culture in general at large. That's kind of crazy. Whether this game did well or not, it had a huge impact on the world in a really weird roundabout way. And I think that's kind of neat. So, hey, those are my thoughts on Cortex Command. It's not the best game ever, it's kind of jank, but it's got some charm and I personally really like it. So, hey, I hope you guys have enjoyed my little look at Cortex Command, a little retrospective, I guess you could call it. So, hey, my name has been Neos, I hope you guys have enjoyed, take care, and I will see you next time. Unnecessary explosion! Hey, you made it all the way to the end. Congratulations. I hope you guys enjoyed the first review for the channel. I put an obscenely large amount of time and effort into it, so hopefully you found it informative and it brightened up your day. I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters and just people who support me in general. You guys and girls are super awesome. Feel free to share your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed and subscribe and hit that bell to see future videos first. Catch you guys later.